Hello and welcome to the SDGs Climate Change and Cities Symposium. I'm Sarah Forde, Director of Projects and Programs with the Business Council of Sustainable Development Australia. We're an organisation that works with forward-thinking companies to accelerate the SDGs, companies who have signed up and ready to take action. It's a great pleasure to be here today, and I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which I meet, in which you meet, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to extend our respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders who are with us today and joining us on this call. It's our final day and our final session for the City Partnerships. It's been fantastic having our SDG Cities Challenge cities joining us. And now this session is your opportunity to ask questions of the cities, to drill in what they've been learning over this last week and also over the last 6 months that they've been on the journey with each other. I'm going to introduce our speakers. We have Alexei Trundle, Research Fellow in Sustainable Urban Development at the University of Melbourne and Research Lead on the SDGs Cities Challenge. He will be with us today. Mohammed Shafi bin Tayyib, Green Engineer in Town Planning at Alor Gajah in Malaysia. Thank you very much, Shafi, for joining us. Candice Jordan, the Sustainability Officer at the City of Melbourne. And I encourage you, as I said, any questions that you have, please put them into the chat. Share your thoughts, your links, your research, great resources, tools that you know about, so we can have a really great discussion during this session. It's what makes it all the more engaging, and we can start talking to SDG 17 with that. So I'm going to turn over to Alexei now, who will give us a bit of an overview of what the SDG Cities Challenge is all about. Alexei, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, Sarah, I had to have a glitch somewhere in there, didn't I?
That's all right, a few technical glitches.
Thanks. So I was just saying, thanks to Sarah for being there since day one and picking me up on little things like that in this challenge, because it's just been wonderful having the Business Council for Sustainable Development Australia on board as part of this SDG Cities Challenge. Thanks also to all of you as our participants who have stuck with us till the final breakout session. It's just been fantastic seeing such a diverse range of people from so many different countries engaging on the SDGs virtually here in Melbourne. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm currently on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations in the northern parts of Melbourne in Coburg. I was originally brought up in Ngunnawal country in Canberra near our nation's capital, so it's interesting reflecting on the links between this place and particularly First Nations and Indigenous globally in the process of sustainable development. We often don't acknowledge that sustainability is often most best exhibited and best demonstrated in terms of its length through these amazing and diverse Indigenous cultures and peoples across not just this region but globally. And I think that to not mention the longevity of Indigenous Australians in particular as the original inhabitants of this country for the last 60,000 years, and then have a conversation about sustainable development, it's extremely foolish and is totally lacking in an awareness of the amount of knowledge and the wealth of knowledge in maintaining this amazing continent that I've grown up on. I wanted to give you a little bit of a preview of the SDG Cities Challenge, but this is the fourth session where we've reflected on the challenge, once by me and twice by my colleague Thomas Jacobs, who's been the amazing project coordinator who's steered this ship for so much of 2020. So I did just want to give you a slightly different taste to it this time round. And so on the screen in front of you are the 10 cities that we've had engaged in the challenge for 2020. And I really want to thank both Shafi and Candice as two of our city representatives who'll be talking to you shortly, and the other 8 cities as well that have taken part in this challenge throughout this year. It's been especially difficult. We started this challenge and launched it back at the World Urban Forum in January and February. But obviously COVID's had a huge impact on cities, but also the ability of cities to connect throughout this year. And I think it's great to see so many of you here today virtually, but I also want to acknowledge the difficulties, particularly for some of our least developed country city colleagues in engaging on in these virtual platforms. We are looking for more partners going forward, and there was a mention by Claire Ferris-Miles in the last plenary of the need for a decade of action, and that's something we really want to do through this challenge. What we want to do, and this effectively was a pilot year for us, is actually find a model for engaging partnerships through the SDGs at a city level going forward in the Asia Pacific over the next 10 years. So if you are on this call, you're interested in partnering with us going forward, please get in touch with any of us in the project team, Kathy, Thomas, myself, and we are really interested to talk to you, because we think we've got an interesting model here where what we've tried to do is to dig deep down into SDG 11, look at the targets specifically, and set out some really clear challenges within the SDG 11 sub-targets for cities to have tangible discussions on and to bring business partners in on, so that they can explore the SDGs through something very specific. And as we'll no doubt discuss later in this session, that's also been interesting because there's been a wider interest in these cities of almost sort of scaffolding up their levels of knowledge in the SDGs and then broadening that out to all 17 SDGs. So I won't go any further just now. I do want to welcome to the virtual stage a colleague from Alor Gajah municipality in Malaysia, Shafi, who's going to give you a brief presentation. And I also would like to note that Shafi will have to unfortunately leave us at roughly half past, or a bit after half past, maybe 40 past the hour. So if you've got any questions for Shafi, please put them in the chat promptly and early, and we'll either try to get back to them as quickly as possible, or we can take them on notice and get responses to you after the session. So over to you. Thanks, Shafi.
Okay, thank you, Alexei. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Right, thanks to Alexei, thank you to Sarah, organizer, and also Steve Chan. And hi to Candice Jordan, one of our speakers today. Good evening, but in Malaysia, almost afternoon. Yeah, we are in afternoon. So good evening to all, everyone. So for Alor Gajah, I will present about our challenge and what is the status for the SDG cities in Alor Gajah, especially in Melaka. Next. Okay, next please. Wait, a short brief about Alor Gajah. We are in the third smallest state in Malaysia, around 1,364 kilometers square, and we are the historic state in Malaysia. So if you come to Malaysia, you must visit Melaka in our state. It's must, not compulsory, and it's not optional. But okay, next please. And Alor Gajah to provide efficient and high quality municipal services with green technology for Alor Gajah resident. And our vision is to transform, please back. And our vision to transform Alor Gajah into a sustainable city towards green technology by this year, 2020. Okay, next. So for Alor Gajah, we start green technology since 2011 until 2017. But today we practice the combination green technology, sustainable, and also SDGs. So we start transform our Alor Gajah city through green technology since 2011 until 2017. Next. During that transformation, we focus on 4 elements: green city development, community engagement, ecotourism, and also green initiative or best practice. Okay, next please. So after we enter Malaysia around 2015-2016, for Alor Gajah and Melaka mainly, we focus SDG since 2017 until today. Next. So we focus on localizing the SDG through engagement and partnership. This is the first and the main point to do the SDG in our city, because we are not a big city in Malaysia, but we need engagement and partnership from private NGOs and individual to make it happen in Alor Gajah. Next, please. So for SDG Alor Gajah, we have a 4 phase. Phase 1, starting the SDG from top management. We get the full commitment from the mayor, and we plan to engage with uh, private or stakeholder. In phase 2, in planning SDG, we include the awareness program, SDG committee. We create the SDG among us committee, and we set the SDG baseline, and also brainstorming workshop. Phase 3, more on implementation and management SDG, and phase 4, closing SDG, research and development, and also reporting the SDG. We are now in the phase 2, planning SDG, and the latest, we will conduct the special workshop for the VLR, voluntary local review, in this end of this month. Okay, next, please. So SDG starting 2018, 26 September, we launching the SDG. So we name it Alor Gajah towards SDGs. So last year, 11 February, we start internal seminar and workshop to the SDG committee, and also briefing to top management on awareness. In this year, 4th April, we start the voluntary local review with one of the ministry in Malaysia, and also with the Urbanized Malaysia. And then we do again briefing to top management on VLR last month, 24th August. And the last plan to do the special workshop on VLR with a stakeholder and the state agency on 20th and 23rd October this month. Next, please. Next. This is one of our activities, best practice in Alor Gajah, Alor Gajah Coffee Zone Day. Next, please. So we partner with local community and also local agency, urban farming. Next, please. And the Sustainable Communities program, this is with the rural village, rural community. Especially, we need to close the gap between urban and rural area. Next, please. And also in development, we have a special area. We call it Malacca World Solar Valley. So we have a special guideline, special area. Any development from developer or individual must follow the guideline and the rules. Next, please. So from the first phase from Urbanized Malaysia. So according to the first report, the 6 goals are on the right track for Alor Gajah is number 9, number 11, number 12, 15, 16, and 17. This is 6 goals based on our strategic yearly planning and also our land planning. Next, please. And also from the second workshop, 24th August before, our internal also suggest to include goals number 7, goals number 8, and also 13, because this is very close with our local authority. Next, please. Okay, since this year, Alor Gajah selected among the 4 local council under Malaysia SDGs Cities. So we just received the certificate from Prime Minister last Monday in Kuala Lumpur with the Kuala Lumpur City, Shah Alam City, Malacca City, and also Putrajaya. So this is a picture our mayor received from Prime Minister last Monday. Okay, next please. So our challenge now for local government due to the pandemic COVID-19. So the first one is the local government are on the front line, yes, but their capacity to respond depends on their budgetary authority and the government governance context. Yes, that's true because Alor Gajah with a limited budget, but we need to respond to the COVID. But at the same time, we need to focus also on the SDG. It's quite challenging. So most priority right now is health due to the COVID-19. Number two, rule of society approach and effective coordination between local, state, and national authorities are needed. Yes, this is very important. So we need to synchronize what is the very important, what is the main key point issue right now. Of course, the COVID-19, but at the same time, we need to take care of our economic issue and also social uh, uh, social area. Number three, well-resourced local government and can make an important contribution on the immediate healthcare response, addressing socio-economic impact and recovering better. Yes, this is a three challenge issue that we face right now in Alor Gajah, and also I believe local authority and others local authority we face a same issue, same challenge. Okay, next please. So for local action for global commitment, number one is to increase cooperation with the private sector and NGOs, as well as introduce incentive to attract public awareness. So right now, Alor Gajah in partnership with local private sector, so we plan to have a special incentive to tackle the community, the NGOs, and also the local residents to participate in the SDGs activity and best practice. Number two, focus will be on recovering better at the local level with an emphasis on issues such as energy, water and waste management and green space. For 5 years ago, Melaka faced a water quality issue, water shortage issue. So far, energy quite okay, yeah, no problem, energy, but we need to switch to renewable energy and energy efficiency. So we need no more conventional electrical consumption, power to consume our daily use. And also waste management, Melaka especially, we have limited space to dump our waste, especially to create a new landfill. So our current landfill right now very packed with waste, but and our local agency struggling to educate people to recycle the waste before throw to the landfill. These are two local action we are focusing right now in Alor Gajah and also in Melaka. Next, please. I think it's last or finish. Yes, that's all. Thank you. That's all from Alor Gajah. If you have any question, you can ask me right now. Thank you. Back to Alexei.
Thanks very much, Shafi. And because Shafi has to leave a little bit earlier, I will sort of take any immediate questions and just provide a couple of reflections myself. So if you do have a question for Shafi and some of the amazing work that Alor Gajah has been doing in the SDG space since 2017, so certainly some long-term lessons we can learn there. Please put them in the chat. I might just put one question to you just now, Shafi, before we go to Candice and some reflection from the City of Melbourne. I was really interested to hear about the Malaysian Urban Forum, which occurred in the first couple of days this week. There is a history of engagement of Malaysia and the Malaysian government in these international urban platforms. The current executive director of UN Habitat, Ms. Mamunah Maud Sharif, is actually a former mayor of a city in Malaysia. So she's got that sort of line of sight from the local to the global. In terms of what you've learned in the process of establishing a voluntary local review, has that been an effort that has been developed in partnership with other cities within the region, or is it really a Malaysian specific initiative with those cities that you mentioned?
Okay, right now for VLR, SDG VLR in Malaysia only for 5 cities selected under national level only. We don't have any partnership or link to others city. But if organizer and LSA uh, plan to have a link or connection with Malaysia, I will introduce to the organizer in Malaysia under Urbanized Malaysia. No problem.
Fantastic. Thank you, Staffy. We've got a question from Kathy in the chat, and I think I'll add a little bit to this as well, because this was something I wanted to ask about scaling up from the local into the national. Kathy's just asked, is there a willingness from the national government to work with your city on the SDGs work? And I'd also just throw a second question into that, and that's, have you, in your own processes for doing that voluntary local review, have you been looking towards the voluntary national review, and is there a line of sight up that way into the national structures and reporting on the SDGs?
Right now, they plan to have a VLR report for 5 cities, and right now, each cities arrange the workshop for the briefing on the VLR preparation, and the Urbanized Malaysia plan to submit the report to the ministry, our ministry in Malaysia, by March 2021. And also to report, to present at the UN New York next year, I think on May 2021.
Fantastic. So I'm sure Penny, if she was on the call, which she probably won't be given the time in New York at the moment, from our first keynote of this symposium, would be extremely excited to hear about that, given that they've got a global call coming out of New York for this voluntary local review declaration. Thanks very much, Shafi. Given that there aren't any questions right now, I might actually pass over to Candice, but if you are able, Shafi, to stay with us a little longer, we might have just a little bit of time before it reaches 40 past the hour to take one or two more questions. Thanks, Shafi. So over to you, Candice, and the City of Melbourne.
Thanks, Alexei, and thanks to you and Sarah for having us and helping us with our challenge. It's been a really good experience so far. So yeah, as Alexei said, I'm going to take you through the SDGs challenge that we've put forward and the progress we've made to date so far. So on the next slide, I've popped what is, I suppose, our challenge statement. And so it's really trying to look at how we can bring together the SDGs and climate change adaptation. So the City of Melbourne does a lot of work to adapt the city to the impacts of climate change, things like greening the city, capturing water through stormwater harvesting, providing information and support around heat health, and much more. But understanding how effective these actions are can be quite difficult. Like any other monitoring and evaluation effort, monitoring adaptation entails a continuing process of systematically collecting data on specified indicators to provide both us at COM and also our stakeholders involved with indications of the extent of progress towards achieving adaptation objectives. But yeah, what do we measure? Knowing what to measure can be difficult. The SDGs provides a framework to help track progress towards sustainable development. So, for example, SDG 11 outlines indicators to track the resilience of the city, including access to green space and building resilience to natural disasters. But it's also apparent that climate change sits across all SDGs, and that's something we've learned through participation in this challenge, being able to look at the linkages across the SDGs to each other, and then also looking at the linkages to the different strategies and work that we do at the City of Melbourne. So from that, how can we use the SDGs and their targets and indicators to understand how well we're adapting to climate change? Can we use existing indicators, or can we modify them and localise them to help us track those measures? And then also from that, use that information to prioritise climate change action for the city. So before going over our progress and what we got out of the workshops this week, I thought I'd provide just a little bit of context on the next slide. So climate change is already having far-reaching impacts impacts across the world, and Melbourne has experienced these impacts over recent years, including drought, flooding and extreme heat events. And experts warn that these events are not only going to become more intense, but they're also going to occur more often, and that's regardless of any strong action we take on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We're also living through a global pandemic, which presents both challenges but also opportunities for how our city adapts to climate change and how we build resilience in the community to cope with those shocks and stresses and disruptions that occur. So the City of Melbourne and our partners, we need to ensure that we're minimising the adverse impact of future events and current events, and harness opportunities for our city and its people. And we recognise that the SDGs can be a driver for change. So how we use the SDG framework to support our climate change action both now and into the future. So on the next slide, I've outlined this is the question or problem statement that we posed to the experts in our workshop this week. And so we had this to help frame the discussion that occurred. And so, yeah, we wanted to think about how the SDGs can help us understand if we're doing the right things and also if we're doing them the right way. And looking at across the breadth of the SDGs, so not just SDG 11, but yeah, all of them to help us achieve our adaptation vision of a city that's adapting well so it can survive and thrive. So this helped us identify some problems and opportunities, which I've highlighted on the next slide. To help us, we first identified some problems that we're facing when trying to monitor and evaluate our adaptation planning work, and then from there we could identify opportunities or solutions that we could explore. So the first problem we have is around choosing indicators that measure adaptation outcomes. It's difficult to attribute and understand how different actions effectively reduce vulnerability to climate change impacts, and also building resilience. So qualitative and quantitative indicators are both needed, but identifying which ones are useful can be challenging. However, the SDG framework does present us with an opportunity to select some of the indicators that have already been developed that not just measure sustainable development, but also measure climate change action. So using an existing set, which also enables us to benchmark against other cities, and also potentially scale up with various levels of government. So the next problem we have is around collecting and analysing data, and that's key to tracking progress. So we already collect a lot of data at the City of Melbourne, and so there's an opportunity for us to assess that existing data and see how it aligns to the SDGs and their targets and indicators, and also then the ones that we would select to monitor adaptation, and use that to create a baseline to then track progress from. We also had a really good discussion about how we can drive more action, and noting that we can't adapt the city on our own. We need to work with the community and other partners, and that's crucial to our success in achieving outcomes. So we've got an opportunity at this point in time to work together with the community to create a vision for the future city, one that's thriving, resilient and livable. And that's definitely coming through, as I'll talk to in the next point, through the SDGs, but also the COVID recovery. So we're hoping through this we can get more buy-in on sustainable development and climate change and go on a journey together as a city. And then, finally, climate change impacts everything we do at council. So embedding it into our strategies, our plans, our operations, it's critical for the livability of our city. So in the current context, there's an opportunity to align our efforts with the SDGs framework and also our COVID-19 recovery response. We can prioritise integrated solutions that achieve multiple benefits, and also be more efficient in how we build the resilience of our city and community by bringing these processes and responses together. So I also wanted to highlight on the next slide, so these are some of the key takeaways that I got from the workshop. So some of these I've already touched on, but just wanted to go into a bit more detail about the things that resonated with me and what I think will really help us progress our challenge. So applying the framework, the SDG framework, and using the COVID recovery to engage with decision makers on climate change action. So that's both internally and externally to COM. We're in a really good position at the moment to drive change through this process. Creating a shared vision with the Melbourne community. So really, this is about including citizens in the planning for their city, taking a participatory approach, and that aligns really well with SDG 16 as well. Acknowledging that what the community consider important at this point in time may change in the future as we start to take action and implement change, and so we need to be flexible and responsive to shifts in community, not so much values, but shifts in, I suppose, what the community cares about or is interested in at a particular point in time. Visualization of data can tell a really powerful story, and connecting with people and using that to connect people and drive change. So you're utilising data as a tool to communicate to decision makers and the community to gain support for climate change action is something that we should do more of. Engage and empower the community through citizen science programs. I really like this one. So getting the community actively participating in city activities and decision making, and enabling them to contribute to achieving the vision and goals that we've all collectively set for the city. I think that's a really great way to take everyone on a journey together. When it comes to data collection, so only use data that tells you what you need to know, that we don't need to use every piece of data that's out there. If you've set your vision and your outcomes first, you can then look for data sources that will tell you how you're tracking against those. So rather than, collecting data for data's sake, you're just collecting the data that you actually need. And finally, acknowledging that we don't need to do everything at once, that we can focus on indicators that are most relevant and useful to begin with, use that as a baseline and then move from there. And I think a big part of adaptation is being flexible and responsive to change. And so we want to make sure that that's built into any processes we undertake. So the problem and opportunity mapping and these takeaways from the workshops have all informed or will inform where we go to next. So on the next slide, outline progress and next steps for us with our challenge. So we've already identified that there is alignment between the SDGs and targets and indicators and climate change adaptation. Across the breadth of the SDGs, there are many indicators that we can use to track, and in particular, some goals more than others. So goal 11, which is around resilient cities, 6, which is around water management, 7 is around energy, 9, critical infrastructure, then 13, which is around climate action, and I think also 16 and 17 are really important around partnerships and community participation, information sharing. So all these goals relate to how we design and build the city, how we manage our natural resources, how we strengthen community resilience and partner with others to achieve our outcomes. So the next steps for us will be to identify which targets and indicators are going to be most useful, and capturing that through our local SDG prioritisation framework that we're developing, so making sure that they're linked. And also looking to, and some of this work's already underway, but develop a vision to enable climate change action in line with the SDGs and our COVID-19 recovery response. We want to make sure that this work will help drive future decision making and fast track adaptation action for the city, both now and into the future. And I'll finish it there. Thanks, Alexei and Sarah.
Fantastic, Candice. Thank you so much. I think, Shafi, you have to go soon. So, Candice, before we come to a question with you, we might jump in to ask Shafi some more questions. I was really interested, Shafi, when we were talking before, that you seem to have done a lot of work, and there's been some questions that you've been answering in the side panel. The VLR, how how has working towards reporting helped how you have tackled the prioritization of the SDGs and what you've tackled first?
Okay, for the first VLR, the Urbanized Malaysia only view on the strategic planning by this year, but we will have the full discussion by end of this month on the special workshop. So on that day, the speaker will introduce or train us how to tackle, how to choose the best goal based on our group discussion.
Alexei,
And
do you have
Shafi,
any other questions before Shafi has to leave?
yeah, well, I was just going to add to that a little bit. I thought it was great to see that Alor Gajah identified, or Urbanice in their support of your first pass VLR, identified partnerships as one of your key strengths. I wonder if you could maybe pick out some of the key partners that elevated that up in terms of the different goals, and maybe even some lessons learned. I think far too often, we have a very north to south concept of city to city learning, and I think it's so good to challenge that in the richness of SDG engagement and localization in Malaysia. So I'd love for you to give Melbourne and our other participants on the call some ideas about how to really foster partnerships at a city level.
Okay, regarding for the partnership, for the starting, we only communicate or partnership with federal department, the ministry, and also Urbanized Malaysia. But in the second phase, to have the VLR report, they ask us to have a partnership with a local agency like agency that control the energy, water, and also the transport mobility. So right now we have our local agency partnership with the energy department, and also with the company for that manage the water, and also we have a private sector here under transportation. We have a Honda manufacturing here. Honda, one of the manufacturing in Malaysia, built in Alor Gajah. So we do the partnership, special partnership with a Honda manufacturing here. So how they can help us to uh, to to make this VLR happen. And also we have a big solar manufacturing here, sun power. So we also do the partnership under the energy goals, number 7. That's all.
Thanks, Shafi. I mean, it's just so fascinating. We heard from Director General Ching Yu Yao earlier in the week, reflecting on New Taipei City as a manufacturing hub and trying to reinvent itself through the SDGs. We see these lessons from Alor Gajah partnering with major companies, and then we reflect on Melbourne. Our last major transformation was an economic crisis in the 1990s, which paralleled with the collapse of the manufacturing sector. So it's just the way that we can draw these really clear lines of sight on particular city-specific ideas and then generate shared learning is just so heartening.
Yeah.
Sarah, have we got any more in the chat? I've sort of lost track of it. I was listening to intently. I think you're on mute this time. There we go. 1-1, square the ledger.
Pardon?
Shyamalan VLR publicly available?
Oh, okay. Shah Alam. They already present the first VLR report, first phase VLR report on Abu Dhabi last WOOF 10 at Abu Dhabi, but they cannot publish the official right now, but they can share the draft only because they still to complete the second and the last phase based on our last conversation on last Monday.
There you go. That's hot off the press, if ever it was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
and it's interesting.
Shah Alam, for information, next month we will have a visit to Shah Alam. So we will, they will teach us, share us their experience about the preparation for VLR report. What is the challenge? What is the benefit? What is the weakness? Or what we need to do? The same like Shah Alam VLR report next month.
Fantastic. Thanks, Shafi. And you've gone past time. I know we said we were going to let you go at 40 past. So, did you have any final remarks just before you leave?
No, yeah, I just want to say thank you to organizer Alexei, Steve Chan, Sarah, and also to Candice Jordan to that invite me to have the give a talk about SDG cities today. So see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shafi.
Thanks, Shafi.
Right. Thank you. Right.
Bye-bye. Candice, if we can come to you, you made some really interesting points. One of them I wanted to pick up on was this achieving multiple benefits and how the crossover of a framework can identify opportunities in different areas. So I suppose by mapping some of those indicators that you've done across your plans using the Sustainable Development Goals, you've realised that there are other benefits or potentially even challenges that you face by looking through a different lens.
Yes. Oh, can you hear me? My audio. Yep. Yes, definitely. I think we've been doing a process mapping actions against the SDG framework, and this is COVID recovery actions, as well as we're going to start to look at our adaptation actions as well. And it's very clear as you look at the breadth of targets and indicators across the SDGs that climate change action touches everything. So it's not just what's in the environmental space, but also social space around communities, in terms of housing, so sustainable housing, affordable housing, around health and well-being, which is interesting because Goal 3 is around health and well-being, yet the targets don't necessarily align to, say, climate change action, but the goal intention does. And then, across there's one around jobs and economics, so job creation through climate change action, and emerging, I suppose, future technologies or innovative actions that we can take that align in terms of that space. So it touches a lot, and it's, I suppose, just a matter for us to go through and make sure we're making it as relevant as possible to the actions that we take at the city. So I think there's, you mentioned challenges as well. I think in some ways the challenges are that there are gaps, but that presents an opportunity that we can, through this framework and align our work, we can identify where those gaps might be, and then identify, that's where we need to take action to build resilience of community, create more social cohesion. And I think that's something really interesting, actually listening to Shafi, and from a Malaysian context, that and this is something we've learnt through flood mitigation and social resilience in communities, that in the developed world we rely more on infrastructure, but our social resilience isn't as strong, where in the developing world it's actually the opposite. They have a much stronger social cohesion and connection, but less of that engineering type infrastructure. So I think that's something that we can look to the SDGs to drive change in, and hopefully build more social resilience amongst the community in Melbourne.
Thanks, Candice. And do you find that you, obviously, councils have a clear boundary, but these issues don't have a clear boundary, and so how do you collaborate, or have you been collaborating with other LGAs on your boundaries around this action? How does that happen? And I don't know if the framework helps, because you can talk to, well, we're all signed up to this and this is SDG 17, let's partner together, or it's not necessary, you just do that work anyway.
It's a good question, because there's no say brick wall around Melbourne, even though we're in lockdown at the moment and there's a metaphorical wall. There's no wall that stops impacts going over our municipal boundary to other councils and vice versa. So, it's very important that we do work in partnership with, other local governments, state government, water authorities and corporations to achieve outcomes. And in the monitoring and evaluation space, there has actually been a lot of work happening at the local government level through a project that was initiated through the Western Alliance for Greenhouse Actions. That's a Western Metropolitan Melbourne Councils called How Well Are We Adapting? And more cities have started to participate in that program. But again, the challenges which I think we see through the SDGs around localisation has come through that process too, that it really is context specific. So what you track and measure has to be relevant to what's happening in your municipality. So we can learn and share information across councils, and I think that's probably going to be the same with the SDGs. You do want some consistency so you can then benchmark and compare, but there will be an element of difference because we are dealing with some different issues. And I always think a good example, I suppose, for the City of Melbourne is bushfires don't directly impact our municipality, but they can indirectly impact us, where some of the more growth councils in metropolitan Melbourne or regional councils, bushfires are a major risk for them. So, things that we can share and learn, but there are differences as well.
And Sarah, I might add to that as well, if that's all right. I think it's interesting. There's a question in the chat I can see about the 100 Resilient Cities initiative, which I know was across all 31 councils across Melbourne. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the sort of the metropolitan setup, City of Melbourne is just the inner part of 31 metro councils, and I think it's often reflected, it certainly was through that program, that the diversity in cities is a source of sort of additional creativity and innovation. That means that there's a localized version of city networking that can occur that allows knowledge sharing and partnership across them. But then, of course, you've got those arbitrary brick walls that sort of occur at the end of the boundary where a cycle path might start and then suddenly finish, or urban forest initiatives might clearly be delineated from one council to another. So I don't know if you wanted to directly tackle what's going on in the resilience space, but maybe a broader question for you, Candice. How do you see the SDGs linking up those other metropolitan councils across Melbourne? I know we've got UN Global Compact Cities program flagged in the chat, but they're also represented in our participants on this call. And there are some other initiatives around the SDGs that have been deployed by other cities in the City of Melbourne through partnerships with RMIT University and Monash University and others. So do you see the SDGs as being part of that collaboration, and have there been sort of any direct examples of that have emerged already?
Yep, I'm off mute. Yes, so I think one of the great things about being involved in the 100 Resilient Cities was that it did span across the whole of metropolitan Melbourne and provided the opportunity to upscale work across the whole of Greater Melbourne. So, for example, the urban forest work that we've done at the City of Melbourne, Resilient Melbourne have created a Living Melbourne, which is a metropolitan urban forest strategy. So that's expanding on the work that we've done at COM. And so that's one example of, I suppose, one of the benefits of being involved in a program like 100 RC. But I think I suppose the lifespan of that work continues, but I think in terms of the SDG framework, it does provide an opportunity to everyone can opt in. So it's not just metropolitan Melbourne; it can be any local council across Victoria and Australia. And I think it provides an opportunity to collaborate more broadly. Globally, provides that consistent framework that we can all work towards. So I see it as, I'm not sure if I can highlight any particular examples yet. I think hopefully through the work we're doing with the SDGs, we'll be then able to share that with our neighbouring councils and beyond, and potentially start, seeing it adopted across Australia more broadly. So, no examples as yet that I can think of, but hopefully in the near future we will do.
Thank you.
I can see there's some conversations in the chat already going between said UN Global Compact Cities Program representative, and that's fantastic to see that picking up. And I can also see Martin Brennan in there has picked up on another comment that I had. If that's okay, Sarah, I might just ask this next one and then throw it back to you. I think it came up in Shafi's presentation as well, the way that throughout their VLR process, they had constant points of engagement with city leadership. And what I wanted to ask you, Candice, and I think it links to a question that came up, that Martin's question, in fact, relating to how does this align with council elections and political leadership? And is there a particular role, and I know this is difficult asking you as a representative from within council to reflect on prospective future councillors, but have you sort of seen in other cities as well, maybe some examples of how political leadership can either drive or potentially inhibit an SDG agenda being localised in a city?
Very interesting question. I'm not sure how much I can talk about what's happening at council while we're in caretaker, and I think some of my colleagues are put in the chat if you want to tell me what I can and can't say. So I think there is an opportunity though, with a new council coming in, that we can, I suppose it's a really good starting point for us with the SDGs. So briefing a new council on the framework and explaining the benefits of adopting the SDG framework. So I think, we're at a point in time where hopefully, and from that, we'll get some political leadership. In terms of other examples, can't think of any names off the top of my head, but I know I have, through readings and things, seen that other cities, there's been, I suppose, champions that have really taken the SDGs on board and driven that. And I suppose a local example through Monash is someone like John Waits, who's really driven a lot of the SDG work there. So I think there's definitely an opportunity to see that happen in Melbourne. Come end of October, when we have new council and we start to work on our new council plan, we'll hopefully see that come through that process. I'm not sure if I can.
No, Candice, absolutely, that was right. I totally put you on the spot on that. Sorry, but I think the broader narrative I think that has come throughout this challenge has been that political support can really accelerate and catalyse a lot of this engagement, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the key cyclical lever. A lot of the bigger questions that we've been looking at, and this is kind of putting on my SDG. The project that we're working on with the City of Melbourne is actually aligning with planning cycles, and it's not just as much about electoral cycles, because in many senses the Sustainable Development Goals aren't a heavily politicised agenda in the same ways that something like climate action might be, or major sort of infrastructure initiatives can sort of get heavily polarised. And it doesn't seem that, although there might be this talk about negative globalism to some extent, almost every single country, at least in some way, is engaged in supporting this. So from the national level down, Agenda 2030 is there, and it's there to stay for another 10 years or so. Sorry, Sarah, I'll go back to you. I just No,
not at all. I think one thing I'd like to ask Candice, being the City of Melbourne, obviously a lot of businesses in your municipal, and how do you engage with them on the SDGs? Like, are you finding, what are you doing? Do they know much about it or not? Or what are your thoughts?
Sorry, was that the community, did you say?
No, business. Because I think we often think of how do we engage the local community, but when you're a CBD council, a lot of your constituents are business, big and small, and they have a lot of impact and a lot of influence potentially on accelerating action.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, it's a critical part of being a capital city, working with business and industry. And I think I'm not sure, and actually Alexei might have some thoughts on this as well, through the work we're doing with Melbourne Uni to develop this framework. I think there's going to be an engagement process that we go through with that, and that will be with community, councillors, business. I'm not quite sure if we've identified what sort of activities that will be yet, but I think our first step is probably going to be around the engaging internally and identifying the relevant internal stakeholders and looking at data, and then from there that will hopefully inform who we engage with externally and how we do that. I mean, we have various tools at our disposal and methods that we use at the City of Melbourne, whether it's through online platforms or won't be in-person events, but virtual type events kind of like this. I don't know if we've really identified that yet, but we do have existing processes that we can go to, and we have a lot of existing relationships as well that we can tap into and work with on that.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I'm conscious of time, Sarah, but just to quickly add to that, I think, and it links to Roberta Sacosta's question in the chat, identifying owners of targets is often the key way of doing this if you're looking at across all 17 SDGs, because when you get into the specifics of an individual target, you can pick out, oh, well, manufacturing relates to this, so we need to pull Honda in here, or this branch of council has ownership over this particular area, so we need to get them on board. And if that's mapped out comprehensively, you can sort of distribute the SDGs across an organisation, and that actually helps with buy-in as well.
Yeah, great point.
And embed it further as well in terms of action, and that's what we hope with climate change adaptation, that through this process we can start to embed it more across the organisation, as it is. There are different areas within council responsible for different, they have different roles and responsibilities. So being able to embed through this process, I think, I hope and think will be really useful.
Thank you so much, Candice. We've actually reached the end of our session and the last City Partnerships webinar. Actually, the end of the symposium is about to occur, so I encourage you, if you can head back over to the closing session. That's going to be with Marley Holloway-Clark and the curators Kathy Oak, Anna Hurleyman and Judy Bush. Thank you so much, Candice. Thank you so much for all your time in the SDG Cities Challenge up until this point and today, and Alexei. And thank you everyone for joining us today, and I hope you enjoyed the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you.